that I learned as a little kid growing up in Jaipur. I'm also a big fan of the sport, as you might have already guessed by now. Anybody here who doesn't like cricket? Thank you for being here. It was nice having you. Yeah, so I think to be fair, this is the kind of sport which people love to hate. And if you're winning, then it's a great place to be. And if you're losing, then everyone starts saying, I think Indian hockey needs support. And I think the funny thing about the sport is you can learn a hell of a lot. And I think as people in life and business, there's a hell of a lot you can learn from sport. And cricket's a great example of some of the stuff that you can learn, and I'll try and share some of that with you. She did mention that I started my career with this company, Hindustan Unilever. I must tell you, in those, probably still is, it's one of those places where, you join that company, bright-eyed, you think, wow, this is the place to go and work. And when I got a job as a management trainee in this company, I said, I've made it. Because now I'll take such big decisions like, should Zeenat Aman really be replacing Juhi Chawla, as the model for Lux? And you can imagine how excited I must have been to go to work the first day, thinking shooting is what's going to happen all the time. This is what happened. And I joined this company, and guess what happened on day one? They sent me here. Yeah? They sent me into a small town to go and sell soap. Okay? I learned a good lesson out there. I think it's a lesson that all of us need to take to heart. The truth about business is really learned when you're out there in the marketplace, when you're out there meeting customers, talking to consumers, out there in the real harsh world. That's where life actually happens. Okay? So it's tempting for many of us to believe that success is out of this big idea, put a girl under a waterfall and you'll sell a lot of soap. Not true. The real truth is that you've got to understand what makes consumers part with hard-earned money, right, for that piece of soap. And what can you learn from there is actually a lesson that can stay with you for the rest of your life. And I think I learned a hell of a lot over here. And then I, of course, went and worked for this company called Pepsi. Okay? And I think it's a great example of a company where passion helps to kind of beat a competitor. Okay? So we were the small company from America taking on the world's most expensive brand, the largest company in the world, the most valuable brand. I forget what it's called. Yeah, it's some 4-letter word, that's all I remember. Yeah, but you know what, we took these guys on, and we took them on and beat them. Okay, and I think it happened not because Pepsi had bigger budgets. It happened not because Pepsi, while we claimed it was the better drink, and in blind testing it would score over the other fellow. The truth is, this brand and the business won because of passion, because they managed to get people excited about selling this brand. And I think that's again another lesson to take back, which is sometimes winning teams have this little ingredient of passion, okay, which can suddenly transform an organization and suddenly make budgets look bigger, competition looks smaller, problems vanish, and everything seems, hunky-dory. And then, of course, how many of you are C.K. Prahalad fans? Anybody here who's read Bottom of the Pyramid? Yeah, so I think it's a great book, and I highly recommend you must read his book, which is called The Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid. I was hugely impressed by this book, so I decided to go and work at the bottom of the pyramid, and I sell diapers now. Yeah. And you don't get more bottoms than when you're in this business over here. So it's been, again, I think, a lot of learning in terms of what can happen, and somewhere along the way, a book has happened. Okay, I was lucky. I was lucky to have worked with a lot of people who taught me lessons, who taught me stuff, and just working with them. And these were sometimes salesmen, sometimes an accountant somewhere, but just working with them taught me a hell of a lot. And I said, hey, maybe there's an idea here, and perhaps there could be something that I could share with people and make a difference to other people's lives, just as these stories made a difference to my life, which is how the habit of winning was born. And what I will do is to try and give you a bit of a sneak preview, like a trailer of what's inside this book. But it's really not intended to be about the book. Okay, the intent is to try and share with you some other stuff which I think works. Okay, I've been fascinated by why is it that some people turn out to be extraordinary guys. Why is it that some teams first one, why is it that some teams suddenly play way above potential. And I think there's a lesson somewhere in it for all of us. And I'm going to try and see what is it that makes winners truly special. Okay? To give you a sense of how this book was born, I think there's a good story here, which is really the story of a statue called David. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's a statue which is about 18 foot tall, made of marble. It's in Florence, in Italy. And it's, of course, it's sculpted by the great Michelangelo. People who come and see this, they go back impressed. They say, wow, when they see this. Okay? But I don't think they go back with the full story behind the sculpting of David. The story goes that there was this large slab of marble lying around for many years, about 20 foot long. Okay? And a lot of sculptors were invited to make something out of it. They all looked at that marble and said, "Kuch nahi hoga. This is a flawed piece of marble. There is something wrong with this piece of marble." Okay? And so it went on for many years. And then finally Michelangelo was invited to come and do something with it, and he took it and he started working on sculpting David. And the story goes that when he was actually working on it, banging away in his workshop, a little kid went up to him and said, "What are you doing? Why are you hitting this piece of marble so hard?" And you know what Michelangelo said? He said, "Young man, there is an angel inside. I'm just helping to set it free." Okay? And if you think about it, that's true for all of us. Okay? There is actually a winner inside each of us. And all it takes sometimes is for someone to come and chip away some of the unwanted stuff around us. Okay? And as someone who's been very keen on this entire area of coaching and helping other people to perform, I think this is a great principle that coaches use, which is, it's not about putting something into the other person. Okay? You don't make winners by putting something else in, by feeding new stuff. You often make winners by just getting some of the dirt out, by just getting some of the dead wood out. And if you can do that well, you'll actually allow this winner to emerge. So what this book has, really is stories. And okay, thanks. So I often think, and it's been like a personal belief that, truly there is a winner inside each of us. Some of us are lucky. A sculptor comes along and chips away the stuff that's not required. Some of us go through our lives with that winner still inside, nicely hidden, pristine, brand new, unused, still lying inside. So what this book is all about is really like a toolkit. Think of it as a sculptor's toolkit. It's got hammers and chisels, but instead of real hammers and chisels, it's got stories. And these stories will hopefully, help to kind of take away some of the stuff that might be preventing each of us from becoming the kind of people that we can be, from becoming the kind of winners that each of us were meant to be. And I think that's the underlying premise. There is a winner inside. There is a leader inside each of us. Very often what happens is he's trying very hard to hide it from the rest of the world. Very often what happens is he's trying to play by somebody else's rules. He's trying to live somebody else's life. Okay? And that's where the problems start. So this is really about saying, how can we ensure that the winner inside comes out into full potential? Okay? So I'm going to start with this great example of winning, okay, which is really the mother of all peaks. It's the Mount Everest, yeah, the highest peak in the world. Everybody knows, that the first man climbed Mount Everest was Tenzing and Edmund Hillary. That's right, Sir Edmund Hillary. Now the story goes that, Sir Edmund Hillary, after one of his expeditions, when he tried climbing Mount Everest and failed, okay, he was very disappointed, and he came back to base camp and he looked up at Mount Everest and he screamed to no one in particular. And he said, "You know what? You Mount Everest, don't be too proud. I'll get you one day. Okay? I'll get you. Because you are a mountain, you won't grow. I'm a human being. I'll grow. I'll get better." Okay? And that, I guess, is the underlying philosophy which tells us all that, never mind who you are, never mind where you are, never mind what you do, there's always room for all of us to get just a bit better. Okay? But then that also asks, lends itself to another question. Tell me, if two people want to climb a mountain, what do you think is the most important thing they need? Sorry? I can't hear you.
Oxygen.
Oxygen. Bingo. I mean, sometimes life is all about very basic stuff, and you need oxygen. right? If you don't have an oxygen tank, you're dead before you start. So you need oxygen to get started if you want to climb a mountain. What else would you need? Yep.
Will.
Sorry?
Will.
You mean the one you leave for your children, or? Yeah, sure, you need will. You need willpower. You need a lot of willpower. I think it's underestimated sometimes, but as much as oxygen, you need willpower to proceed.
Teamwork.
You need teamwork. I think that's a good one, because you see there are two people. Usually if you have two people, they'll make sure neither of them climbs. But you need teamwork to ensure that you can actually get there. Sorry?
Courage.
Courage. You need courage. Brilliant.
Belief.
Belief. You need courage, you need oxygen, you need
Passionate.
Determination.
determination, passion. You know, you need all of this. You need training. Okay, someone has to teach you. And therefore you have organizations that can teach you how to climb a mountain. You need, perhaps,
Strategy.
you need strategy. Bingo. You know, if you need a plan, you need something, how will I do it? You need a plan, a roadmap to get there. You need favorable weather conditions. And don't underestimate that, because, you know, sometimes you can be knocked down by the weather, right? So,
Attitude.
attitude, yeah, absolutely right. You need attitude. But you know what? If you ask me, what are the first things you need if you want to climb a mountain?
Shoes.
You know, you need a mountain. Okay? Yeah, because you know what happens sometimes? If you have a mountain, everything else will fall into place. Okay? What happens to many of us is we say we want to climb a mountain, but we don't have one. And we start complaining. My oxygen tank is not, brand new. It's an old one. Need a new one. And we start saying, you know what, teamwork, yeah, that bugger is not good enough. Or we start saying, the weather, the environment is against me, or else I could have climbed the mountain. Or we start saying, I'm not lucky enough. I didn't go to one of those fancy Indian institutes of whatever, and therefore I don't have the know-how to climb a mountain. Not true. If you want to climb a mountain, the first thing you need is a mountain. Okay? So you need a goal. You need to get yourself a goal. And once you have a goal in life, you will find that everything else falls into place. Okay? If you have a goal, suddenly life will change for you. Okay? And everything else will then follow. And therefore, good thing to do in life, and for all of you particularly, is before I tell you the story of what happened to this man called Karli Takacs, remember, get a goal in life. Find your own mountain. Okay? I think it's a good first step to have. Anyone here who's heard of this man called Karli Takacs? Good. Another one I can tell you anything about now. So Karli was actually a Hungarian soldier. Okay? This is now, I think, the late 30s. And young Karli is, I think, a 27, 28-year-old man. Sergeant in the Hungarian army. Also, a very good rifle shooter. And one of the best shooters in the world. Okay? Widely tipped to win a gold in the Olympics coming up a couple of years later. This is how, therefore, the 1940 Olympics that were to happen. Great guy. 1938, in an army training session, disaster struck. Okay? Takacs had a grenade in his hand, and as he was about to throw the grenade, it exploded in his hand. And as it exploded, it blew his right hand away from his shoulder. The hand which would have won a gold medal for Hungary, the hand which was actually the world's best shooting hand, was gone. Okay? Takacs was finished, destroyed, distraught. He didn't know what hit him. And just imagine if this happened to us. What would you do? You'd say, poor fellow, yeah. And he'd be excused if he said, why me? Why is God being so unkind to me? Why did he do this to me? Right? Takacs was in hospital, and within 15, 20 days, the guy said, gosh,